All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming back. I'm Mark Bowker. If you guys weren't here before, I just ran the session on cloud and how it impacts your IT career. I'm up here with some new friends of mine. Thank you guys for coming.
You're welcome.
We'll start off with a quick introduction with everybody and just kind of understand who they are, who you work for, what your roles and responsibilities are, and we'll start right here with you, Brett.
All right. My name is Brett Chevalier. I work for Children's Hospital in Colorado. I'm a Microsoft engineer on our team. Mostly deal with the system center stuff, ranging from ops manager, config man. I deal with the virtualization environment, help monitor that, and assist the team in any other Active Directory roles and that kind of stuff.
Great. How long have you been there?
I've been there 2 years now.
Excellent. Good. All right, Bray, right in the middle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bray Doherty. I'm with Empire CLS. We are a luxury chauffeur ground transportation. And I am systems engineering and project management. So I work a lot with the business. I work a lot with my IT folks. And a jack of all trades. I can do everything from technical to planning.
Did they let you drive the limos?
I could.
Do you have like the big Hummer stretch one?
15 passenger stretches,
that would be
32
cool to
passenger
show
buses.
up with. My kids would be real impressed if I showed up with
Air
that.
ride equipped.
Wow. Nice.
Yes.
And we can go tonight.
We go tonight. Good luck.
Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Daniels. I am a vice president at T. Rowe Price, responsible for operations. I'm responsible for our private cloud internally in T. Rowe Price from inception to where we're going with it. So that's what I do.
Perfect. How long have you been there, Peter?
I've been with T. Rowe at 18 years.
Excellent. That doesn't happen every day. Perfect. So let's just start off by understanding a little bit about cloud. Just I want to understand what's your impression of it? What does that mean to your organization? What are you doing or not doing? So just a little history of kind of where you've come from, what you're going, and you can start again, Brett.
Thanks.
You did fine the first time.
Oh, cool. So I think for our implementation of cloud, obviously the first step was to get into an environment of virtualization, so we had flexibility and a good foundation to build on to offer a faster delivery model for services and more flexible model for services. So kind of right there in the base level, like everywhere everybody starts.
Sure.
We started with obviously virtualizing for a footprint need, but then quickly realized that it became advantageous from a service delivery as far as time to service. So that's kind of where we're at.
It's one of those things, once you get going and almost make the promise of virtualization, people realize how fast you can do it, suddenly they just want more of it faster.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I know we were talking earlier, you're using a couple different virtualization solutions?
We are. We were a very big VMware shop, and we've adopted Hyper-V within the last year and a half, and actually took over the VMware footprint, probably double now its size. So that's helped us out. We still run a big Zen farm also.
Oh, sure.
So the biggest thing with allowing the multiple hypervisors for us has been basically single dashboard management tools. So I can monitor everything through System Center.
Yep.
Just because VMM connects to everything.
Yep.
So that's helped us out quite a bit.
So just by show of hands, who's using VMware in here? Who's using Hyper-V? System Center. That's pretty good. So that's great. So Bray, I'm getting to you, but I got 1 second.
I'm anxious.
So
She can't wait.
when you, people make a big investment in VMware. That's pretty big. You go through training. You make those investments from an infrastructure perspective. What was the trigger that where you guys started to look at Hyper-V?
I would say pricing models were a pretty good trigger. And the product has matured and become a pretty reliable product. Where in its infancy, obviously, there was some reluctance to do so, to go to a Hyper-V product. That's kind of gone by the wayside, I think, for pretty much everybody we've talked to. And it's quite a significant difference in pricing. So,
how do you determine what gets either deployed or run on one environment over the other?
First would be vendor-supported platform. So we, obviously in the medical industry, we run a lot of different software application. So
Sure.
the biggest thing we have to hit is the vendor. If they say flat out it's approved for VMware, nothing else, that's it.
Kind of
It's a
tough to
showstopper.
argue with that, right?
It is. Through the industry, though, there's more and more pressures to become more platform independent.
Sure.
And help us out with that. So if we have an issue, and Microsoft's been great, that if we have a software vendor that's only VMware, Microsoft will actually help work with them to see if we can get them over to a Hyper-V support model.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I also want to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions as well. So before I move on to Bray and move on to another topic, does anybody have any questions for Brett kind of at this point? You know, maybe why he switched or what he was doing or different workloads and how they look at it? If you do, we just got to go up to the microphones. No questions. You're saving them all for Bray.
Thank you.
Nobody wants to go up to the microphone.
So what color is the stretch Hummer? White, black, whatever color you want?
Typically black. It's
All right.
luxury chauffeur
Black is
transportation.
nice. So same thing for you, cloud strategy, what's your involvement, where to come from, what's working, what's not.
Okay, so for Empire, we are a very small IT organization. So the opportunity for us is to go from a traditional ground transportation company with the brick and mortar and the cars and everything happening to transitioning into also a software company. So we can now take our proprietary reservations and dispatch software and offer it to the IT industry. I'm sorry, the transportation industry. I'm IT, right? So this is also something that is going to lead us as a company, because other companies don't have this. They don't have the means to do so.
Have you guys already started to do that? So, or is that just aspirationally what you want to do?
We have plans to deploy by the end of the year.
Wow.
We've started focus groups, bringing in some vendors to see what their needs are, to see what our challenges would be beyond what we think we have.
Sure.
And being a limo provider ourselves, we know what the industry needs.
Interesting. Do you think that when you do that, do you think you'll do it as a software as a service type of model? Do you think it's more of a, hey, we package it up and let you do it? Or do you have any?
It will definitely be software as a service.
Cool.
And we're also going to offer a little bit of self-service where if the vendor needs personal computers, virtual machines, anything like that, more storage, they can simply request it using a lot of the System Center products that will allow us to offer that, and then we can just give it to them.
How do you, so that sounds like you've got a lot of potential preparing to do between now and then, because potentially you do this, it takes off, and you could have hundreds, thousands of small companies running their little limo service coming to you. So from an IT perspective and a business perspective, both, what are some things that you're doing to prepare or even thinking about when you get to that point?
Okay, well, Empire is also cutting edge technology. We're early adopters, so we do have the knowledge of a lot of the software under our belt. But the surprising thing is that it's not changing that much. So the folks that are handling the servers, the network, the storage, which is the baseline of the cloud anyway, are just repositioning themselves to group everything together, package it, and be able to offer it from a customer side.
Interesting. Good. Excellent. Any questions at this point for Brett? Can you go up to the mic just because it's being recorded? And it's kind of cool to stand up there, too. It's like you're on a game show or something.
I have a quick question on the self-help. So to what extent are you provisioning systems to end users today? For example, the ordering process I heard, they can initiate themselves. Is there also like a receiving in the box, taken out of the box, and then do you offer anything via the cloud to finalize the provisioning of that system, including software and setting it up for your environment?
Well, because it is software as a service, most of the items and most of the requests will be via an Internet Explorer link or a web link. There will not be any hardware that would be needed from our perspective to spin up for them. It would all be virtual. Yes.
Perfect. Peter, cloud strategy, you've been there for 18 years. You heard probably cloud back 18 years ago. They just called it something different, I know.
Absolutely.
It's definitely the latest and greatest term. Every conversation's around it. So what I'd like to hear even, what's changed in 18 years?
Wow.
And has anything really changed? And what are you guys truly doing today around cloud and wrapping your arms around that.
Wow. Okay, so first thing is that what you said is correct. We didn't call it cloud. We call it the automated data center, which is that's what it was called before it was called cloud. I do believe that cloud did bring some differences that we didn't have today. So it's to me, and this is just our opinion, it sits right in between, or should I say, a little bit of mainframe, a little bit of client server. Where it's like the mainframe is where we're building our scale units, where we build units right now that we drop right on the floor that has storage, network, and compute already as one unit. We bring it in, we drop it on the floor, System Center sees it, it becomes more capacity, and our users are able to come to the portal. Everything is automated from them requesting what they need, and within 30 minutes they get a server and they go about what they're doing. So our definition of what a cloud is, it is a logically distributed environment. That where it's managed centrally, but it's logically distributed. As we're putting what we call scale unit is what we call where you put storage, network, and compute all together in one package. We call them scale units. So I have a scale unit at what used to be DR. We don't call it DR anymore because we're like hot or warm hot, because we move VMs when we need them.
Sure.
So that's kind of where we are with it. Again, it's called cloud. We used to call it the automated data center, but it is what it is, and that's what we're doing today. We started in this journey actually without knowing it in actually 2006. We were fortunate to see a reference architecture from Amazon, and we said to ourselves, wait a minute, we think we could do this. We waited there were some technologies that weren't available because we're not a build shop. We do not go out and build this stuff ourselves. We rather buy things off the shelf and then use it. We think it's cheaper. And so what we did was two major things happened. I don't know if everybody heard the term runbook automation, but they call it orchestration. These names keep changing. But in 2006 or 2007, there was the runbook automation became available, and we felt that was the game changer when that happened. Because all the individuals if you work in operations in the data center, we all write our own little scripts, whether you're a Unix person or AS4, everybody has their own little scripts, and we felt that orchestration now would help us to standardize that capability, and so from there we went full force into building a private cloud starting in 2007 in full earnest, and like I said today, excuse me, we are a full Microsoft shop in terms of management, System Center. We've switched over from VMware in 2002. We actually brought VMware in. They was a small company and they approached us, and we started using them in 2002. We switched over in 2005 because when we looked at the cost model, we saw right away that it was going to cost us too much, and we felt that Hyper-V, they didn't call it then, it was called MSVS, I think. What is MSVS, I think, what Microsoft called it in 2005.
Virtual server.
Exactly. And we felt we're a good enough
R2.
shop. We did a little study, and what we found is that most of the technology you buy today, you only use maybe 20% of it. So we felt that it was good enough. We used good enough, and then started building our model from there. And we're full Hyper-V. We don't use any other hypervisors, and that's kind of where we are today.
What's your workload mix in that environment?
We run all workloads in there. Yes, there are some limitations with Hyper-V, but again, T. Rowe Price is a very large organization, and what we did was we waited. We felt like, again, good enough. We didn't see the value in spending a lot of money. The gains for us was not that great, so we said, you know what, continue doing what you're doing, and then we'll glide into, we call it our glide path, we will glide into this as these things get more mature. This way we wouldn't have to go through I'm going to switch over from this hypervisor. We don't have to do any of that, and all our folks have been trained and familiar with one suite. So, I'm sorry. And so therefore we found that it worked out best for us, doing it that way. That was a gamble, but it worked.
Explain, what did you call the pod flex thing? What do you call that?
We call them scale units.
Scale unit.
Right, so some people call them containers, some people call them pods, but there are standards coming out for that today. So if you say container, that is a standard. It's not, a container is pretty much has certain environmental requirements, because containers could actually be placed outside. You do not have to have a data center with walls anymore. You could take a container, drop it in, and just wire it up. So if you use the term container, as it becomes more standardized, it becomes more standardized, then you will have you'll be speaking not what do I say, industry standard. If you use the term pod, those are also getting standardized. So we use the term scale unit. And the reason we call it scale unit because each of these units are actually scaled accordingly. We try to keep them in fixed sizes, but what we have found is you will have a little bit of change with it when you do VDI. A workload for VDI is very different than the workload for all the other traditional things you'll use in a data center. So our scale units for VDI, we have incorporated SSD because we think SSD is the next big thing. And so what SSD does for us, we don't use it for caching with storage. We use SSD for you to augment memory and to limit the need for adding disk to get performance. If you put disk in a storage device and to get performance, you have to spread it wide across the spindles. So you're using more capacity than you actually need. What we do is we use SSD, and SSD with PCIe going right in to right through the bus is almost like augmenting in memory, and now everything is almost in memory, and then storage in terms of spindles is only used for traditional storage. So that's how our scale units for VDI is designed, and we're moving that at all our scale units are like that, so we can put large.
Who designed so we talked in the previous session, Peter, a lot about integrated computing is kind of the term we use, kind of virtual computing infrastructures become more integrated, server storage networking. So you have these scale units. Who, was it somebody on your team, or was it a team of individuals that designed them? Yes. To what specifications? Where did you get that from? Where did you come up with this unit concept, and how did you ultimately design to that?
Okay. So the first thing we did was we went out and looked at all our environment. We did an analysis, and it's not very hard, especially there's a lot of freeware out there that you can run analysis on all your servers. And we ran them on all our servers, including the virtual machine host and the virtual machines, as well as standalone. We took that information. We used something called the 95th percentile for measurement. We used the 95th percentile, and then we used that, and we made an educated guess on what we thought we would need. Then we actually started putting the pieces together and running workloads. So we did some tests with certain types of workloads as we started building the scale units until we came to what we considered a happy medium.
Sure.
And from there, then we started integrating the pieces together. So we have HP is the blade servers, Cisco is the network, and EMC is the storage. And then we just got all the vendors together and said, okay, guys, this is what we're building. We're using iSCSI because when we looked at we didn't need fiber channel anymore, but we looked at our performance requirements, we found out we didn't need it, and we have 10 gig. 10 gig was enough. And so we started off with one, and then we went to, that was like our, development type. Sure. Then we went into qual, and then we finally landed on what we thought would be prod. Then we went back to working, of course, with our network storage folks as well as our data center folks, until we came up with a scale unit that would fit for what we call production. And now what we do is, and it fits in one rack. In one rack, our entire scale, we're trying to get it so we could put 2 scale units in one rack. So we run about 400 virtual machines in one scale unit that fits into one rack. We're getting it with SSD, it's getting smaller because the storage is not as big. So eventually we'll run 2, so that's 800 virtual machines in one 42 or 49U rack.
So I'm kind of interesting, is anybody else in here taking that approach with that container, scale unit, integrated kind of approach?
Wow.
Are you guys doing that, Brett, or Bray, are you guys doing that?
Go ahead.
Me. Well, we're looking into the internet approach with the software as a service. But as far as our data center and our infrastructure, we've got HP EVAs. We're still using the disks for storage. So we haven't gotten as far as this yet.
Yep, sure.
We were mostly a discrete server shop using regular 2U chassis, Dells. We are recently going into a Cisco UCS platform.
Oh, interesting.
So
anybody else in here using Cisco UCS? Yeah, we're seeing more of that for sure.
You guys like it? No.
How do you guys like it? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Is that like the white flag you're waving, or?
we're hoping to increase server density. Currently, we're getting about 60 to 1. In some cases, we're even seeing 80 to 1 VMs on a 2U chassis. UCS, everybody we've talked to and case study we've seen are pointing to a pretty substantial increase in that. Obviously, depending on storage, backend, and that kind of thing. So, it's a complete forklift. They're calling it data center 3.0 or whatever. But I mean, it's complete migration of our back-end networking infrastructure. Has to be in place, obviously, first. And our storage teams have to be on board to support this too. So it's a pretty big migration, but we're hoping to take a few rows of racks, Dell servers, and migrate it down to a single rack or two racks for obviously distributed reasons.
Sure.
But yeah, so we'll see.
Perfect. So before I switch topics a little bit, any questions for Peter about some of his environment and his kind of pod design? I keep on forgetting what you call it. What do you call
Scale
it?
unit.
Scale unit. Aaron can ask any hard questions, Peter. All right. So let's kind of shift the conversation to really about a career and kind of how people are planning for this. So you've been there for 2 years.
Yeah.
So virtualization, I assume, wasn't anything new there when you got on board.
No, the migration to a different hypervisor was all, but
Sure.
Basically bringing in a centralized monitoring platform was the reason I was brought in.
Interesting.
They had several different tools, and we still maintain a Nagios environment, but mostly OpsMan has taken over quite a bit of the stuff, including WhatsUp Gold was used for all the network monitoring. And they found out that it wasn't, through no fault of that product, but basically the time and labor it took to configure that product, they weren't catching everything they would like to catch.
Sure.
And on a whim, the manager asked if OpsMan can do it. And being an OpsMan guy, of course, the first thing I say is, yes, why not?
Not knowing what you're getting into.
No, not knowing at all. And then I, worry and try to figure out how to make it work and then involve, if I have to, partners at Microsoft or Microsoft themselves. And in this case, a few Google searches later, the community is huge for that product. And we came up with, there's a management pack extension for doing SNMP out of the environment called XSNMP. And we basically did a POC for 10 switches, and the managers were thrilled that in those 10 switches we found quite a few failures of power supplies and fan units and that kind of thing.
Wow.
From a community, a free management pack that monitors all hardware, NICs, ports, everything. So it was an incredible management pack, and when they saw how well on 10 it did, it blew up to 250 within probably a month. It was fantastic. So OpsMan has kind of become more reliable. They've been approaching me about UPSs. We do UPS monitoring. So of course the answer is yes, why not? And that's one that's a little more complicated, but it's a very extensible product. And through all the development that we've done for the network guys and the network team with OpsMan 2007, we had our 2012 release candidate running. And everything I was doing in 2007, I did it in 2012 as well, just so they could see it.
Sure.
And I mistakenly had the dashboard up, the networking dashboard up for when I was messing with it, and the manager walked by, and end of story. That's my next project. So they're excited about it.
So what's kind of day in the life of your shoes? Are you constantly kind of looking at that? What's happening? Are you setting it up so you're monitoring certain things? Is it sending alerts to people? How are you letting other people know what you may be seeing or hiding from them?
Yeah, I don't know who's OpsMan users out here, but as anybody knows, the potential for alerting is massive.
Sure.
And we've kind of targeted it to groups now instead of one person looking at all the alerts in the console. It's extremely tough. So emails and console views and stuff are very targeted to individual groups.
Sure.
For obvious reasons. I come in as one of the administrators of the OpsMan environment and kind of browse everything over. And if I see something alarming in the SQL world or in the network world, I'll go to those groups and ask them, are you seeing stuff? Are you not seeing something that I'm seeing and that we should tweak a little bit more? And Initially, those groups were a little bit reluctant because when you take their monitoring tools away and you put something in their place, they do get a little bit sensitive. But when you kind of put the ownership back on them to say, this is your tool and you need to customize it and help me customize it to get you what the benefit, what you need to see. I get inundated with more stuff like, hey, we want to see this now. We want to see alerts for this or X, and it's kind of grown in that way.
Are you responsible for a change in process that's happening inside of IT, meaning, or is there a team that's responsible for that? Because that does impact kind of the way things are happening inside the organization, right?
I think it feeds off of itself. So we have obviously a steering committee, and the director level, and even our manager, they kind of see longer term than even myself. Sure. However, when they ask, what can your stuff do, or if we ever want to, they kind of bring those questions out, and we start in the background looking to see how we can solve those problems, and we give it back to them. So I think in the case of especially monitoring, or even in config management, because we obviously use SCCM as well, yep. Once we do a little bit for the group, and they see what we can do, they kind of push us a little bit more, or we push the business a little bit more. Sure. And once we start saying we can offer this to you, they consume that rather quickly and then say, well, what else you got? Sure. And then, of course, we're on the next project. So. Perfect. Yeah.
Where do you, say even 2-3 years from now, what do you imagine will be different than what you're doing today?
I guess I would like to take the man out of the middle of all this. In my vision, I should not have to be asked to set anything up anymore. It can be completely web portaled to the consumer of that data. And I don't care if it's a service or a piece of hardware. Service owners should be able to go to a site, plug in some information about the service quickly, and then have it up and monitoring to them with alerting and everything. So that's where I'd like to see that happening. Kind of a plug-in, they plug it all in and go away. Nice. So perfect. Yeah.
Bray, from your perspective, so I know you didn't start out in IT necessarily, and you kind of maybe explain to everybody how you rolled into IT and what your position is and how it's grown and what you see some opportunity is ahead, kind of looking at some of these new things that you're doing.
Okay, so I grew up with Empire CLS pretty much, and September will be my 20th year. Mm-hmm. So I started on the business side right out of high school, and I was helping out in all the departments, everything from reservations, dispatch, accounting, groups, affiliates, networking, contracts, all of it. And one day there was an opening in the IT department that I didn't know about, but I happened to fix a printer.
That will get you into IT.
So the ONOFF switch, guys, that's what you need to know. That is how I ended up in IT. And then I just grew with it. Empire, at the time, was a full Linux shop. So I've watched the whole progression go from Linux. We were doing terminal service at that point too, and watched it grow into a full Microsoft shop, which is what we are now. So we transitioned everything from emails and our databases and our front-end applications, the platform of which we build our proprietary software for reservations and dispatch. That's changed to the .NET platform from a Linux. So we now offer a lot of web portals and read-only things for disaster recovery, and I've seen tremendous things happen. So growing with it, getting my hands on it, playing with it, doing speaking engagements, learning about it, attending conferences is how I ended up where I am today.
What do you think the most valuable skill set is inside your organization from an IT perspective? What do you think the one that's valued the most and why?
Well, from my perspective in our organization is keeping your head outside of the box, being versatile and agile. And granted, those opportunities are not always available depending on the size of your organization. Sure. You can't just, implement something on a weekend because you felt like it. But sometimes you can. Sure. But you can also build yourself a test environment. So having that need to learn, having the passion to move ahead and stay with the times is invaluable across any organization.
Perfect. Agree. How about from your perspective, Peter? What's the most valuable IT, and I don't want to say skill set because it may not be a technology skill set, but what's the most valuable IT position that you look at, and why is that?
I think change, being able to change. This is, it's ironic, but we're IT folks and change happens so fast, but boy, it sure is hard.
Sure.
So I think the individuals who are willing to change, I'll echo what I heard you say, that taking advantage of new opportunities, being willing to learn, I think those are the key ones. The basics, you can teach most people the basic things as they come along, but those things are intangibles that you just hope that comes with the individual.
So I talked a little bit earlier in the earlier session there's this whole notion in IT that you can be the guy that knows how to use that hammer and use it really well, or you can be the guy that understands how to build the entire house.
Right.
Do you see, so you need both, right?
Yes.
Do you see the hammer skill going away? Do you see it, or do you still see it valuable? I mean, because there's a lot of kind of thinking of, okay, do I need to maintain that technical or deepen my technical skill, or do I need to broaden my skills?
Well, what we're seeing, and again, what we're seeing is that, yes, you're going to need it, but what we're doing is we're actually having a consolidation happening. So where we would have an individual just know storage, and an individual just know networking, and the compute, because of these scale units, you need to know it all. Because if there's a problem on the scale unit, you no longer have the time to go, let me call the network guy. It's all integrated in one.
Sure.
So what we've found is that we have individuals now that have to know all three. Because if there's an issue on the scale unit, they need to look and diagnose it and resolve it as quickly as possible. Fortunately, with virtualization, we can move workloads to minimize that.
Sure.
But what we've found is, so again, the technology is still maturing. What we've done is we've created a baseline of what that is. We don't consolidate, even though we can, too much, because if you do lose it, you've lost a lot of virtual
All your eggs in one
machines.
basket.
So we've learned, we've learned some lessons, being an early starter in 2002. So we hear people, we've got 80 virtual. I'm like, that's good for you.
Yeah.
T-Row price. If I can't trade, I've got a problem. So we definitely look at how many we have, and if there is a failure, how we can move those virtuals as quickly as possible. And then, of course, with the scale unit model, you don't want to have too much capacity.
Yep.
So you want to be able to resolve the problems as quickly as possible, and then move your workloads back to where they
So
are.
there's definitely a consolidation that's taking place from an
Absolutely.
infrastructure perspective and from a role or skill set perspective.
Right.
as
The
well.
other thing is we've found is the whole, I don't know if everybody have heard of ITIL. At this juncture, everybody has heard of ITIL. Well, you can't run a cloud without ITIL. So, but the beauty is ITIL has always been trying to be implemented in a manual fashion. All right. Well, now with things like System Center and all these other products out there, you are able to implement ITIL in an automated fashion.
Sure.
And you can't run the operation without it. So it's no longer, you got to convince all these individuals. When somebody put in a request for a service, and so they, and we have a portal, self-service portal. You go in the portal, you click the service catalog, you choose what you want. When you choose that is a request. And that request has to go to somewhere, and then that request needs to be satisfied. Same thing if somebody wants to do a change. All of those things, we talk about the hardware, but you're going to need another layer of folks who are automating the system and automating those workflows within this cloud environment to really automate it. So I see there's a confluence of things. I think on the infrastructure side, they're consolidating. That means you need to know storage, networking, and compute. Then there's another layer now in the middle that has to understand these processes. You have a portal, you have these workflows that we call ITIL. These are all the processes we do to run operations. You need to know those, and that's another skill set that needs to be done. We've hired a .NET program. I'm an operations shop, right? I'm working in a data center. But we have a .NET developer that now works in our department. We are hiring a business intelligence individual because you have to show back the cost, so you have to do analytics. So you need to be able to show back the cost. How do I pull information out so that this individual has a dashboard so that they're seeing all the information? If I'm working in the investment side of the house, how much, you have all these virtual machines, what are you getting charged for them? All those things now. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Yes, there's change for the traditional role where they're going to need to know everything, but then there's new opportunities opening up at different layers, even at the application layer where we are pushing down the .NETs, as you say, they're getting pushed down, and the developers in the web now are developing things at lightning speed at a different layer. So
it's almost that DevOps role.
that
you hear
DevOps
about.
role is real. It is absolutely real. We see it happening. We're positioning ourselves for that. This is exciting. I mean, this is really cool.
So I've got lots of questions, but I want to give people the opportunity. Does anybody have specific questions? Anything that you heard that you want to get a little bit more visibility into? No, you can keep going. You can ask as many as you like. They're free.
Here's a question I have. In our environment, it's really around the skills and how many of your technical skills do you need to maintain. So we have an environment where we work a lot with outsourced partners that do most of the day-to-day hands-on skills. Then we have a team that sits behind it, which I'm part of, that basically does a lot of the steering, looking at a lot of the new technologies, and then management is management making their decisions. The struggle we see within our environment and within my team members is we are getting a message from the top down that, you have to start managing a service. You have to put that hammer down and start looking at the overall picture. On the same token, we have to manage the service provider, the outsourced partners, and we have to have a measure. How do we measure that they're doing the right thing if we are not maintaining our skill sets going forward? That's kind of the question.
So you're kind of caught into this. You need to be armed and dangerous enough to have the conversation, to understand what they're doing, so you can monitor and at least be able to make judgment on new technology or existing technology as well.
Correct. It's kind of like we're struggling right now. How much time are we spending on this? How much time do we spend, actually getting our hands on the technical?
Sure.
That seems to be kind of a tricky part with some of the companies, especially the one I'm working in.
So that I hear that an awful lot, and any of you can go. But how do you guys deal with that? Because that is, if that's common in your environment, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think he's uniquely qualified for the future.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, because the way we see things happening, we have a private cloud. T. Rowe Price cannot take full advantage of certain. We're just not going to do it. We're not going to. We are an investment firm, investment management firm, and based on compliance and certain things, we're not putting certain things out in the public cloud. But the private cloud does give you some advantages. I heard everybody talk about the agility, time to market, all that beautiful stuff. So that technology message that you're having to deal with is just part of the change that is happening in the way. The interesting thing where I find what you're doing that is actually positioning you very well is that services are not just going to be hardware internally delivered services anymore. So even though T. Rowe has a private cloud internally, we are actually adopting SaaS services. So there's certain services we said, hey, that's okay to go out and do a SaaS, but that still has to be managed, right? Because just because I bought it from somebody else, I still have to manage that service in accordance to what management is going to tell you. They got to go through procurement. Did the SLA that you paid for that thing, how do you integrate that SaaS service with the rest of the stuff that you have? And then there's the hybrid services that we're starting to look at where we can burst certain, if I don't want to continually buy hardware, so I'll work with a provider and burst out into the public cloud, use what I need, and when I'm done, bring it back, right? Well, that pretty much is what you're doing. And that's what everybody, I think, that has a large organization like T. Rowe Price, that's what they're going to do. They're going to have to learn how to manage a SaaS vendor through procurement and everything else and technology. You're going to have to manage your technology internally and keep moving that. And then if you do start using things within the hybrid cloud, you're going to have to manage that too. So you're in the sweet spot, quite frankly. So I would say the skill sets, the skills that you're learning now, I think you're going to be uniquely qualified for what I think is going to happen in the future. So maybe you could teach us how you're dealing with it. Maybe you could teach us how to handle it when it happens to us.
Brett, you see it? You run into any of those other similar situations like that?
I mean, obviously, the danger of moving, to your point, of losing a technical skill set, of dropping the hammer to learn how to just manage the house or build the house. In this case, obviously, someone needs to know how to use the hammer every time. Or whether that's going to be at the cloud provider level, if you're outsourcing that stuff, it's tough. It's tough in any position, though. I don't probably remember everything I've learned in my environments, in my career, and it's not been a long career, 20 years, but It's definitely a concern as I move forward, becoming irrelevant in what I used to know, and versus what I have to learn to move forward. Some things you're going to have to let go. I have to let go. I probably don't know how to use or even answer the help desk calls anymore, and what they deal with. I don't. But I think it's what I know now, what I learn now. It suits what I do now. I would say I have access to, and everyone I work with has access to dev labs. That was one of the biggest things we did for the byproduct of the virtualization move that we did was anytime I need to see a new System Center product or a new product of any kind or an application that our software team is talking about implementing, we have flexibility to spin up another 10 boxes that we need to look at. So that's handy. Any of the studying I do is all in a dev environment, either at work or I have a private dev environment on Hyper-V at the house. It's one of the nicest things about it, especially if you're in programs that you can get, like on TechNet and stuff. Sure. You can get licenses. So it probably bugs my wife most of all, but there's plenty of evenings, and I've had to negotiate time allotment with her of when I get to come home and keep studying and keep learning. It's kind of self-owned in some cases.
That's a good point.
Employers will help you with it. Mine certainly does, and the good ones out there will, but they're not going to hand it to you, and lead you down that path every month or two. I think it's important to come to events like this, as well as stay connected to forums out there and user groups. Microsoft especially has a lot of user groups. I'm a member of a local one in Colorado for Microsoft Enterprise Management User Group, MEMUG, and we can bounce ideas and problems off of other members of that group. So it's definitely, you own the responsibility to keep abreast of it, and if it's go to classes and stuff and reach out to your employer to help you with those, then yeah.
You bring up a great point, Brett. I had individuals that worked with me in the past who thought that responsibility lied 100% with the company, and they wanted company time to study and take exams and everything else. And it just, they didn't understand that people that like you that took the initiative that, nope, I understand that some of that responsibility lies on me. It's my career, it's kind of my path that I'm kind of laying out. And that's something I didn't mention earlier in the previous session, but I should have. You got to take that initiative, right? You got to build stuff out there.
Absolutely. I know people who are happy in a position for 10 years
right.
As answering phones on the help desk. And it's not for everybody to keep moving forward and up, but it's definitely, the sky's the limit if you want to take that responsibility on. I've progressed my own career doing not what I was hired to do.
Sure.
I mean, I do that too a little bit, but I think about the next thing. Even as soon as I'm hired at Children's to do System Center, Ops Man and Config Man stuff, I'm thinking, well, what else can I do? Since I got here, I'm starting to talk about bringing in, we brought in Service Manager or bringing in Service Manager to maintain some of what you're talking about as far as services go, and ITIL. Organizations, obviously, that information tracking from services to physical boxes, and now especially with going to cloud for service provider applications, it all has to be somewhere. So going back to the career-wise, that's something that the bosses, after it was kind of being POC'd, were like, hey, that's pretty neat. Where'd you come up with that? Well, I mean, Microsoft and groups out there, or other users on the forums, pointing to some of this stuff. So I was always taught, do what you were hired to do, I suppose, but learn what you want to be doing. Think ahead for sure, not just for the company, but for yourself. So.
Right, do you see that in your organization? Do people take that initiative, or do they?
I find myself in between all of you. In fact, my position is more similar to what you're going through right now. So again, we're a small to medium-sized company, but our IT staff is extremely small. So I'll give you a good example. Is my telecom guy is now our SharePoint and Service Manager guy. I do telecom sometimes. And we all share it, but we all have to learn it. And while the tools are there during business hours to help you, you also have to take that initiative outside those business hours and make it your passion. Attending, going to Las Vegas for MMS is a great example. Another one, TAP programs, the technical assistance programs. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with the Microsoft acronyms, but
There's a lot of them.
I got that one. So the TAP programs are a great avenue for education. Not only are you exposing yourself to innovative products and cutting-edge technology, you're also learning the path and the roadmap of what's ahead. And you're putting the stuff in a test environment, you're ripping it out, you're learning what breaks, what doesn't, how does it work with my stuff. It works great when it was built in a Microsoft lab, but I'm not using Dell, I'm using HP, and I'm not using, I'm using Cisco instead of something else that somebody else is using. So the environment certainly changes, and the exposure to those types of situations will definitely, you're going to learn faster than reading a book that way, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's learn by doing and learn by teaching also
Yes.
helps you. And that also, if you teach somebody what you're currently doing, some people have a phobia about that with job security. And that's the biggest annoyance for me, because I find if I teach you how to do my job now, I got to go over here and do this new thing and implement this new technology. It frees me up to do other stuff. It's the more you know, and the more valuable you are, even as you teach somebody else to do it.
That's why I teach my son how to mow the lawn.
Did you lose that job?
Yeah, I lost that job.
Okay, well,
Little Tom Sawyer action, some things never
That's
change.
right. Other questions? So I have a question for you. So say my son was old enough to go into college and he wanted to take an IT career, an IT kind of focus there. What technology, what kind of focus would you guys advise him to actually take? I'm positive take when he was going to kind of go into school or further his education.
Well, that's huge. I'm obviously biased. I'm an infrastructure guy, so everything's infrastructure. But there's so many things, that cross that path. There's times I have to know, obviously, scripting and some DB side. And I'm not a DBA, and I never pretend to be, and those guys are on a totally different cloud than I'm over here. But it's good to know the basics, especially around how much is relied. System Center is completely all driven SQL, obviously. Sure. So if I don't know a little bit about it, then I'm stuck. And I have to rely on those guys when they have their own projects to deal with too. So I would say broaden the focus a little bit. Actually, that's an oxymoron, really.
Yeah,
you cannot be focused. And it's tough to know that. As far as, obviously I'm always going to say infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think it's where it's at. It all starts with the core.
It's never going to go away, right?
It's not going to go, well, I don't know. They keep going out there with this cloud stuff. I might be out of a job,
Maybe a
too.
while. True.
What do you guys think?
Well, my advice would, very similar to what you're saying, is while you have a general idea of what you might want to do, you definitely want to take a step back and look at the larger picture. You see a lot of more project management roles within the IT organization, even from technical people,
Sure.
Myself included. And so as we move forward with the cloud and all the as a service, you can certainly step in and pretty much just do it. Say, yes, I could do this, I could do that. And then, as you're going through that, I would also find out what is it that's drawing your attention. Are you an infrastructure guy? Are you a programming guy? Are you a project management person where you prefer to speak to a customer? Sure. But you still have that technical knowledge. You've had your hands on it. You've had the hammer, and now you've got the suitcase. So, it's odd to say, but step back and put your head in the cloud.
Look at the bigger picture.
Right.
There's a lot of heads in the cloud.
Yeah.
Perfect. What about you, Peter?
It's an interesting question. I was sitting here thinking about it while you were talking. I don't know. Liberal arts. I know. I just believe that there's things we don't know yet that are going to happen out of this. I found what Bria is doing very interesting, where you're actually taking a solution that was closed, and now you're going to take it and offer it as a SaaS service. Now, if you just look at that, right, there's a developer. I believe that private cloud technology are going to drive way more developers. I think there's going to be such a demand for developers that there won't be enough people to fill those demands. So if it's clearly just money you're interested in and you're going to college, I'd say go be a developer. If it's, but again, everybody's interest is a little different. I don't think the infrastructure is going to go away, but I think what's interesting about the infrastructure side is you're going to have to know the whole thing,
Yeah.
and which I kind of like because I like that. So
Sure.
knowing the whole stack versus waiting on a call to talk to this person. You heard about about Amazon and the pizza teams, right? I don't know if you've heard that concept, and that is actually happening now, where you have a group of individuals that are supporting that particular service from beginning to end. So I think that is going to definitely happen, and I think that's that whole idea of the infrastructure person and development person all working together. In fact, we're working on developing what we're calling a cloud architect model.
Sure.
We're working on that right now. What do we want from a skill set? And you know what? We talked about the infrastructure and we talked about the application.
Sure.
So it's pretty interesting what we're seeing, that you're going to pretty much want to know it all. Of course, you may want to focus a little bit more on infrastructure, but a cloud architect is going to have to know the application as well as what we call the fabric.
Sure.
Right, which is we call scale unit, but it's the fabric. You need to know the fabric, you're going to need to know the application, because those are the services that you are delivering on top of that. We don't even call it the cloud anymore. T-Row has moved on. We've called it, it's a it's a service delivery platform.
Sure.
And so that platform has applications on there that you're delivering to individuals. The architect needs to know about that and then know their business in terms of the services that drives that business. So I know this is a long answer, but
Yeah, no, it's a good one. It sounds like I got to take out my COBOL books and get my.
no, I would go Ruby on Rails maybe.
That is exactly it. That's interesting.
Maybe a different, like we're bringing in Hadoop, right? I mean, just the things that we're doing. This is amazing stuff. I could talk about it forever. But. So Hadoop, everybody knows what Hadoop is? Right, Hadoop is, right. So you still need SQL, because when we started using Hadoop, we went, wait a minute, I got to get some analytics. Hadoop is not going to give you any analytics. It's just a whole lot of data that you could, retrieve and store very quickly. But with the SQL, you still have to integrate that so that you can get some analytics out of it. Who's going to do that?
Yep, good point. That whole cloud architect kind of is interesting, where you have to understand the infrastructure point of view. You've got to have that good management visibility into that. You've got to have the right skill set. The application side of it certainly comes into it as well. It's a certain size organization where that becomes important, right? I do see organizations that are smaller, maybe like yours, that are more mid-market. You aren't going to have that application expertise. I guess you do kind of from your design point too. So that even comes into play there as well.
Yeah, we fall literally in the middle of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's almost bringing all those different pieces together. Good. Questions? How are we on time, Danielle?
We are at an hour, so we are perfect.
You guys have anything else to add? I mean, it's been great having you up here. I mean, I've learned a lot just listening from you. Are there any other things that you'd like to add just from people that are out here attending? Or we can take a nice question.
I did have one follow-up for you. You talked about the SSD drives and so forth. The big sticking point for a lot of the infrastructure upgrades is talking about whether you're going to virtualize a database. Do you also do that on the SSDs as well, or do you have something else?
We're playing around with that now with, what's the new version? What's the latest Microsoft database? SQL 2012.
2012 is releasing,
Right, we're playing around with that right now with SQL 2012. Our thought is that if we could get everything, so we're treating SSD almost like one step away from memory, but with PCIe, it's pretty fast. And then we want everything in there. We want everything in there, and then the storage is only used for, tertiary things. Then we'll use disk. But if you get it in there, it's just going to be so much faster. As a trading company, the demand is ridiculous for the speed is just, we're never fast enough. No matter what we do, we're just never fast enough. So we think we have an opportunity here to satisfy them for a little while anyway. It's like the microwave, right? It used to be cool, and it used to be like, how fast is the microwave, And now you put something in the microwave and it's taking a minute, and you're like, could you hurry up? So, we're under that pressure all the time. So. Excuse me? Well, that's a great question. We're still trying to figure that out, because our thought is if we put less hard drive. So the question is, because we're putting the SSD right into the servers. We're not putting it, with these storage, EMC, they put this, the
right.
cache,
Cache, right.
right? That's what we were thinking at first, but this is different. This is not the cache that's in the storage for reads and writes. This is going right into the server. So there's a company called Fusion.io, and Fusion.io actually HP OEMs that product, and you could slap it right. We are all Blades, right? So you could slap it right into the Blade server. The G8 server that's coming out, we're playing with it now from HP. They are coming out with their own SSDs, built right into that too. So I clearly feel it's the future for really two reasons. One is we have a lot of data at Tiro. I can never tell when a hard drive is going to fail. I will just please tell me, if you could help me to tell me when a hard drive is going to fail, please let me know. I can't tell when a hard drive is going to fail. And then when they started with these SSD a couple of years ago, they were saying, well, they don't last long. They could only take so many reads or so many writes. But guess what? You could tell when it's going to fail. With SSDs, you could tell when it's going to fail. So if I could tell when something is going to fail, I could plan for that. And so that's where we started experimenting. And we just believe, with all technologies, over time it will get more, they'll make it more reliable. But I could tell two things is, one, I could tell when it's going to fail. And two, as compute power keeps going up, they could get faster too, because it's the same technology. With drives, I don't know, I haven't seen a drive gone any faster in the past few years. I mean, I don't know if they could make them any faster. So I have a form factor thing, I've got a reliability thing, and so from actually in terms of power, that is something we actually have to look at. I'm assuming that all these big disks I have are going to chew more power than,
Moving parts, yeah.
that's just a thought. It's
Brett, are you guys using any SSD for anything?
We are not.
You? Yeah. I mean, we see it used in very similar situations you are. Yeah, we're using it almost to the VDI environment's an interesting one, database environment's an interesting one. The VDI one's pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of things happening there from a software perspective. It's going to do some caching at the servers from a software perspective, so I think that gets pretty interesting what they do there as well.
It's going to be perfect. It's cool.
All right, Brett, Ray, and Peter, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
We'll
guys.
be up here if you have any questions, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.